everyone. Imagine working a full-time job in Texas and not being able to afford rent, groceries, or even basic bills. That's the reality of thousands of Texans earning the current minimum wage. People working hard, doing everything right, and still falling behind. My purpose today is to persuade you that Texas must raise its minimum wage. I work hourly jobs myself, and I research current data from Texas-based organizations and economic reports. What I found makes one thing very clear: $7.25 is not enough to live on. First, I'll explain the problem, then I'll explain the solution. Next, I'll show what our future looks like with or without change. Finally, I'll tell you what actions we must take. Texas should raise the minimum wage because $7.25 is not enough to live on. It harms workers, families, and raising wages would strengthen the Texas economy. Texas still uses the federal minimum wage of $7.25, a number that hasn't changed since 2009. That means wages have stayed frozen for 17 years. While the cost of living keeps rising, every Texas report that wages in Texas has not kept up with the inflation, leaving workers unable to meet basic needs. The Austin American State Sale explains that Texans have one of the lowest minimum wages in the country, that many workers cannot afford rising living costs, and according to Legal Clarity, Texas even blocks cities from rising their own minimum wage, keeping workers stuck at $7.25 no matter where they live. Housing data from NLIHC shows that Texas needs more than $7.25 to afford rent. In many cities, a worker would need 2 or even 3 full-time jobs to cover basic expenses. So how does this impact us? Low wages means young adults cannot afford to move out. More people work multiple jobs, families fall behind on bills, and there are less money for schools, transportations, or emergencies. It affects almost every part of life. Some people argue that raising minimum wage will hurt small businesses or cause job losses. The sales tax sale explains that raising minimum wage actually increases consumer spending, which helps local businesses and state regs today. Show the most Texans, including many business owners, support raising the minimum wage. Now that we understand the problem, let's talk about the solution. Texas should raise the minimum wage to at least $15 an hour. With gradual increase over time, a phased increase gives businesses time to adjust. Higher wages reduce turnover and increase productivity. And when workers earn more, they spend more locally, which strengthens the economy. Sales tax sale reports that states with higher minimum wage sees reduced poverty and stronger local economies. Every Texan shows that raising wages improves worker stability and reduces reliance on public assistance. Some argue that raising wages will cause inflation, but Legal Clarity explains that inflation in Texas is driven more by housing costs and corporate pricing more than wages. In other words, workers aren't the cause, and raising wages won't suddenly make prices skyrocket. Now let's imagine what our future looks like with and without change. If we do nothing, picture more Texans working 2 or 3 jobs just to survive. More families falling into poverty, young adults unable to move out and afford school, businesses are struggling because consumers have no spending money, a future where hard work doesn't pay enough to live. But if we raise the minimum wage, imagine Texas earning enough to pay bills, save money, and live with dignity. Build a future instead of constantly trying to catch up. Texas must raise the minimum wage to support workers and strengthen our economy. Here's that for protect workers, because if you don't, wages will stay frozen while the cost of living keeps rising. But if you do, we can create a fairer, stronger Texas where workers is rewarded. No worker full-time should struggle to survive. Raising the minimum wage is how we fix that.